The door was locked. It had never been locked before. Not in the 5 years we lived together. Not once. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, holding 2 coffees in one hand and a bag of her favorite blueberry muffins in the other. I remember thinking maybe she was showering, or sleeping, or mad at me for forgetting to pick up her dry cleaning again. But then I heard it. A laugh. A man's laugh. Not the TV. Not a phone. A real, human laugh. Low. Comfortable, like it belonged there. My hand froze on the doorknob. The key felt heavier than it ever had before. I unlocked the door. The world went silent, except for the sound of my own heartbeat. You know that feeling when your body moves, but your brain hasn't caught up yet? Like you're watching yourself from a distance? That was me, stepping into the living room, staring at the trail of clothes on the floor, a jacket that wasn't mine, shoes that were too big, and her scarf tangled in the mess like a confession she didn't mean to leave behind. The coffee spilled before I even realized my hands were shaking. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she came out of the bedroom wearing his hoodie, the one I had seen in our laundry basket last week and assumed she borrowed from a friend. She stopped cold. He followed her out, shirtless, looking at me like I was the intruder. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I just said one thing. You said you were at your dad's. And she blinked, like she had to think before lying again. That's the moment something in me broke. Not anger, not sadness, just a clean, hollow kind of silence. But here's the thing. This story doesn't end with me walking out. It doesn't even end with her choosing him. Because 3 weeks later, she almost died. And I was the only one who could save her. 3 weeks passed. I had moved into a motel. Not the sad kind with flickering neon lights. Worse. The kind that smells like mold under bleach and makes you question every life decision during the 5 seconds it takes for the shower water to warm up. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not my brother. Not my coworkers. I just disappeared. I couldn't face their pity. Couldn't stand the questions, the quiet looks that said, "You really didn't see it coming?" No, I didn't. That was the worst part. I saw nothing. I trusted everything. Her name hadn't lit up my phone once in all those weeks. No texts. No fake apologies. No, it's not what it looked like. Not even a receipt for half the rent. She vanished into that other man's hoodie and never looked back. Until the night she called me, from a stranger's number. At first, I didn't recognize the voice. It was hoarse, fragile, barely above a whisper. I thought it was a wrong number. I was about to hang up. "Ethan," she said, "please don't hang up. I don't know who else to call." I froze. I could hear muffled sounds in the background. Beeping, movement, a voice on a loudspeaker. "A hospital? What happened?" I asked, though every cell in my body wanted to yell instead. Her words came out in pieces. She'd collapsed at a bar. The guy she'd been with, the same one, didn't call an ambulance. Just left. Walked out while she was on the floor, clutching her side, screaming. A bystander called 911. Doctors said it was her liver. Something had ruptured. She needed emergency surgery. And, as it turns out, I was still listed as her emergency contact. She never changed it. Classic. She was alone. Her dad was traveling. No friends in town. Her own sister hadn't spoken to her in a year. She had no one. "I don't know what to do," she said. "They said they need someone to sign." I hung up. I stared at the ceiling of that motel room. Light flickering, the bed creaking underneath me every time I breathed. I thought about every moment I had spent loving her, sacrificing for her, and how easily she'd discarded it. And then, I picked up my keys. I don't know why. I just went. And what happened at that hospital? That's where things really started falling apart. I pulled into the hospital lot sometime after midnight. I hadn't even put on proper shoes, just slid into the half-wet sneakers by the door of the motel. The whole drive over, I kept telling myself I was just going to check if she was alive. That was it. 5 minutes max. I'd stand by the door, nod at a nurse, maybe sign something, and leave. But of course, that's not what happened. The nurse at the front desk looked me up and down like I was some lost hitchhiker. I gave her Emily's full name, and she raised an eyebrow. "Are you the husband?" she asked. I wanted to correct her. Say not anymore. But instead, I nodded like an idiot. She told me Emily had been stabilized after surgery, but wasn't allowed visitors until morning. I asked if she was conscious. The nurse just said, "You might want to sit down before you see her." That should have been my first red flag. But I was too tired. Too curious. Maybe even too hopeful, though I hate admitting that part. The hallway to her room felt longer than it should have. Every step sounded loud. I passed a man asleep in a chair, a janitor humming to himself, the buzz of fluorescent lights that felt like they were shaking loose every thought in my head. And when I finally reached her door, it was cracked open. I stepped in slowly, expecting to see her pale, maybe unconscious, maybe with tubes and machines around her like some tragic movie scene. But no, she was awake, sitting up, smiling at him. The same guy? Hoodie guy? The one she swore she barely knew. The one who left her on the bar floor while her liver failed. He was sitting beside her bed, scrolling through his phone like he had every right in the world to be there. She noticed me and blinked, but didn't say anything. Neither did he. No one moved. For a second, I thought maybe I had the wrong room. But then I saw it, her bracelet. The one I gave her last Christmas. Still on her wrist. Still sparkling under the hospital lights like a joke I wasn't in on. Wow, I finally said, almost laughing. You really do bounce back fast. She opened her mouth to speak, but he stood up first. You're not needed anymore, man, he said. She's fine now. That's when something in me snapped. Not loudly, not violently, just quietly, like a final thread coming loose. I walked out without a word. But the next morning, is when the call started. And that's when I realized I hadn't been the only one she lied to. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the motel bed staring at the popcorn ceiling, blinking through the flickering of the busted wall lamp like I was being interrogated by my own regrets. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just hollow, like I had walked too far into a tunnel and forgot which way I came in. She had him there, in that hospital room, the same man who abandoned her during a medical emergency. And somehow, I was the one who felt like an intruder. That image kept playing in my head, looping on repeat, like a dream that didn't know when to stop being cruel. By the time morning came, my phone had 8 missed calls, 6 from an unknown number, 2 voicemails. I didn't check them right away. I assumed it was Emily, maybe trying to explain. Or worse, trying to justify it all like it was some grown-up version of "it's complicated." But then the phone rang again. Same number. I answered, more out of reflex than anything. What I heard next made me sit up so fast the mattress squealed under me. Ethan. The voice was low, gravelly, familiar in the way a smell from childhood hits you in the gut. It was her father, Ronald. We hadn't spoken since before the surgery. Not because we fought, but because he never really liked me. He thought I was too soft, too emotional, not husband material, he once said when he thought I wasn't listening. But now, here he was, calling me at 7 a.m., like he was the one drowning. I don't know what's going on with her, he said, almost whispering. But something's wrong. Seriously wrong. I stayed silent. I didn't trust the man, but I was curious. She's been acting off, he continued. Not just recently. I mean for months. Before the hospital, before the diagnosis. She started pulling away, hiding things. There's money missing. She changed the locks on my cabin. And now I'm getting calls from some attorney about a property I supposedly co-signed, but I never did. I blinked, trying to keep up. What are you talking about? She listed me on paperwork for a lake house. Upstate. I never saw a single document. But the loan went through. I just found out when they called me to finalize a second mortgage. I felt like I'd been hit by a wave. Are you saying Emily bought a house behind your back? Or, not just mine, he interrupted. Yours too. And that's when he emailed me the PDF. There it was. My name. My signature, forged. She had used my identity to open a joint account and secure a loan. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring, heart racing in that cold, slow way it does right before you pass out. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't even infidelity anymore. This was fraud. Emily hadn't just broken my heart. She'd used me. And if I didn't act fast, I was about to be on the hook for a $412,000 property I'd never even seen. But the worst part? I still didn't know why she did it. And I had a terrible feeling that the answer was going to destroy me more than anything else ever could. After her father sent me the documents, I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. My name. My forged signature. A $412,000 property nestled in a wooded corner of upstate New York, signed and processed through a small local credit union that I'd never even heard of. Everything looked official. Legit. Except I had never touched a single page of it. Emily had done this. Quietly. Efficiently. While I was sleeping next to her. While I was spoon-feeding her soup and changing her bandages. While I was telling myself I still believed in us. There's a kind of numbness that comes with betrayal at that scale. It's not loud. It's not rage. It's cold. Like something inside you just goes offline. I sat there, still in last night's clothes, motel room stinking of damp carpet and stale coffee, and I realized something terrifying. I didn't know who she was anymore. Maybe I never did. I called the credit union. Played dumb. Asked for a balance check on the mortgage account. I couldn't quite remember the number for. The woman on the line was helpful. Too helpful. She verified my identity, using public records, which made my stomach turn, and confirmed that the mortgage had gone active 36 days ago. I asked for the address. She read it out, and it hit me like a brick. The town wasn't unfamiliar. We had passed through it once, 3 years ago, on a weekend road trip to Niagara Falls. Emily had made me pull over at a lake nearby. Said she wanted to feel the silence. I remembered she had looked at the shoreline like she was memorizing it. Now it made sense. I packed my things and left the motel before checkout. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Answers? Closure? Evidence? Maybe I wanted to see if the house even existed. Maybe a tiny part of me was still clinging to the idea that this was a mistake. That someone had tricked her, too. That she was caught in something bigger than either of us. I was lying to myself, but it kept the engine running. The drive took 5 hours. I barely remember most of it. I missed 2 exits. Ate nothing. Just kept watching the GPS, watching the distance to that address tick down like a countdown timer to something I wasn't prepared for. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway, I felt like I was outside of my own body. There it was. The lake house. 2 stories. Wood siding. A red door. Private dock. Secluded by pines. A real estate agent's dream and my nightmare. I walked up the path slowly. No car in the drive. No lights in the windows. I half expected alarms, dogs, cameras. But there was nothing. Just silence and the eerie echo of birds and wind over water. I tried the front door. Unlocked. Inside, the air smelled new. Like fresh paint and polished floors. There were boxes stacked in the entryway. Furniture partially unwrapped. A couch, still in plastic. A bottle of wine, half empty, sitting on the kitchen counter beside 2 glasses. One with lipstick. One with a smudge of something darker. A man's fingerprint, maybe. And that's when I saw it. A photograph. Framed. Displayed like it had always been there. Emily, the man from the hospital, standing in front of this very house. Her arm around his waist. His hand resting on her stomach. She looked happy. No, not happy. Pregnant. I stood there, in someone else's kitchen, looking at a life that had been built out of my credit, my savings, my trust, and I realized I was no longer the victim of a simple affair. This wasn't cheating. This was erasure. She had rewritten her life, removed me from it, and started again, with my identity, my money, and possibly my child. But the final twist of the knife? Tucked into a basket by the front door was a pile of unopened mail. One envelope was addressed to me, and inside was something I'll never forget. I sat down on the stairs just inside the lake house, the envelope trembling in my hands. It wasn't thick, just a single sheet of paper inside, folded once and addressed to me in handwriting that felt too familiar. Sharp angles, confident strokes. I stared at it for a full minute before I tore it open, almost afraid that reading it would make everything real. That whatever illusion I had left would finally shatter into something too ugly to name. Inside was a letter. No salutation. No date. Just a few paragraphs, written like the writer expected I'd understand immediately, and in a way, I did. But not for the reasons I expected. If you're reading this, it means she gave you access. I don't know if that was an accident, or if she's testing you. Either way, you need to leave this house right now. I know how this sounds, but trust me, she's not who you think she is. She never was. I blinked. Read it again. My brain couldn't process it fast enough. My fingers were cold. My mouth had gone dry. Emily doesn't fall in love. She collects. She builds stories around people until they're useful, then rewrites the narrative without them. I know this because she did it to me. You knew me once as Jordan Lane. I changed my name in 2018 after what happened. Jordan Lane. No, that couldn't be right. That name hadn't crossed my mind in years. We went to college together, briefly. He was a quiet, strange guy, smart but intense, kind of a loner. And then one day, he was just gone. Rumors flew around. Some said he dropped out. Others claimed he had a breakdown and ended up in some psychiatric ward across the state. But no one knew for sure. I hadn't thought about him in over a decade. And now here he was, writing to me from the shadows of my collapsing life. She ruined me, Ethan. I don't know how else to put it. She got into my life under a different name, told me she was studying psychology, said I reminded her of someone who used to hurt her. I believed her. I let her in. I let her move in. We were engaged. Then one day, she emptied my accounts, forged my name on several credit lines, and left. She erased everything. Even my mother believed I had lied about the money. I had to start over. I had to stop reading. My vision was spinning. The room felt smaller suddenly. The couch, the plastic-wrapped chairs, the untouched fireplace. All of it staged, artificial, like a set on a show I hadn't been invited to. And then I read the last line. She's dangerous, Ethan. But she's also careful. Calculated. If she finds out you've been here without her, she will flip the narrative on you before you can blink. She's done it before. You'll be the one accused. You'll be the unstable ex, the abusive husband, the financial manipulator. And people will believe her, because she's built the evidence for months. Get out. And do not confront her yet. You need to gather proof first. My hands dropped to my sides. I sat there, completely still, until I heard the sound of gravel crunching outside. A car. Not one passing by. One pulling in. I stood, backed away from the window, just in time to see the shape of a vehicle turning into the driveway. A silver SUV with dark tinted windows. The same one I'd seen once in the parking lot of the hospital, but hadn't paid attention to. They were here. Whether it was her, or him, or both. I didn't know. But I had maybe 20 seconds to decide. Stay and confront them now, or take the letter and vanish before they saw the front door cracked open. I chose the second option. And as I dove out the back and sprinted through the trees behind the house, lungs burning, heart pounding like a warning siren, one thought kept pounding louder than all the rest. What if Jordan wasn't the only one? What if I'm not the last? What if this is what she does? I didn't stop running until I reached a narrow service road that curved behind the woods behind the lake house. I couldn't even feel my legs anymore, just a buzzing under my skin, a vibrating panic that hadn't stopped since I'd read Jordan's letter. I'd stuffed it in my jacket as I ran, along with one other thing I snatched from the house on instinct. A torn envelope from the bottom of the basket, still sealed, labeled Insurance Claim, 2021. I had no idea what it meant, but something told me it wasn't random. I hitchhiked with a delivery driver heading back toward Albany and got dropped at a bus station, where I sat for over an hour just breathing into my palms, waiting for my body to feel like it belonged to me again. Every fiber of me wanted to go to the police, but what would I even say? That my wife, no, my estranged wife, had forged signatures, stolen identities, and built a fake life with my name? That I had a letter from a ghost of her past warning me that I might be next? No hard proof. No witnesses. And if Jordan was right, she'd already built the narrative against me. I needed leverage. I needed something undeniable. Something digital. Something I could trace. I remembered the laptop. The one I had given her 2 years ago for her birthday. A silver MacBook with a custom case that said, "Let's build something." I thought it was sweet at the time. I thought we were building us. I had connected it to our shared cloud account back then. She never turned off the sync. When I got back to the motel, I logged in. It took a few tries. My hands were shaking. I had to reset the password. Thankfully, the old recovery email was still mine. And when I got in, it was like opening a trapdoor into someone else's reality. There were dozens of folders, each labeled with initials, date ranges, even cities. JL_2017_Lansing. AR_2019_Durham. MM_2020_Savannah. I opened one at random. Photos, receipts, voice memos, copies of documents, contracts, flights, IDs, passports, messages. One folder had a selfie of Emily with a completely different hair color, holding a dog I'd never seen, smiling with a man I didn't recognize. And then another with that same man's signature on a lease agreement, co-signed by someone named Emily Green. Not my Emily. She had different names for every man. Different stories. Different looks. She was like a shapeshifter that fed off love and legal documents. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was the pattern. Emily, or whatever her real name was, had been doing this for at least 7 years. Maybe longer. She'd find emotionally vulnerable men, usually introverts, isolated, empathetic. build a whirlwind romance, move in fast, tap into their finances. Then, just before the story turned sour or risky, she'd vanish. Or flip the script, make them look unstable, cut ties, collect what she needed, then disappear into the next version of herself. And the worst part? She was good at it. Like she'd studied this. Like she enjoyed it. I downloaded everything I could find, encrypted the folders, and backed them up across 3 locations. My drive, the cloud, an anonymous Dropbox I set up using a VPN. I wasn't just scared anymore. I was angry. And not because she hurt me. That part one could almost forgive. No, I was angry because there were others. I wasn't her first victim. And if I didn't stop her, I wouldn't be her last. I needed to talk to Jordan. To find him, wherever he was, and compare what we knew. Maybe even find more. Because deep down, something told me this wasn't just emotional manipulation. This wasn't just theft. This was something darker. And I was finally ready to face it. I found Jordan 3 days later. He was living under a different name in a small coastal town in Maine. I reached out using the encrypted email address hidden in the metadata of the letter he'd left in the lake house. He replied within hours. 1 line. You're not the only one. Let's talk. We spoke that night over a scrambled video call. His face was older than I remembered, worn down, like someone who'd lived several lives inside one. But when he smiled, really smiled, I recognized the person I'd once shared a philosophy class with, back when life still made sense. Over the next 2 hours, we mapped it all out. He had traced 5 other victims besides us. All men with similar traits, quiet, dependable, trusting. All with stories that ended in betrayal, confusion, or bankruptcy. None had pressed charges. Either they lacked proof or, worse, still blamed themselves. One had lost custody of his daughter in the fallout. Another had checked into a psychiatric facility after being gaslit to the edge of his sanity. But now we had data. We had synced folders, dates, bank transfers, recorded calls, her fake names, her travel itineraries. A complete digital trail. I couldn't believe it. For someone so careful, she'd made one mistake. She underestimated the cloud. Jordan connected me with a private investigator he trusted. Someone who'd helped him rebuild his identity after his life had been scorched. The guy was ex-cybercrimes, quiet but surgical in how he operated. He reviewed our files, ran background checks, and within 2 days came back with a name. Her real name, Rebecca Nolan. Age, 35. Born in Iowa. Moved state to state since she was 18. No single job history. Multiple aliases. She had a sealed record from when she was 22. A fraud charge dropped under insufficient evidence. And after that, a clean slate. Or so it looked. The PI handed everything over to a friend in federal investigations, someone he trusted. And just like that, the wheels started turning. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of silence. Of waiting. Of not knowing if she'd disappear again. If we'd ever get justice. If all this pain and paranoia and obsession would end in nothing but another unanswered email chain. But then I got the call. From her father. Ethan, he said, breathless. They got her. In Florida. At an airport. She was using a fake name. With a fake passport. She was trying to leave the country. I sat down on the edge of the motel bed. The same bed I'd collapsed onto when all of this started, and I cried. Not out of joy. Not out of vengeance. But because, for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't crazy. She was real. The things she did were real. And now, finally, someone else believed me. The news spread fast. Some of the other victims came forward. A case was built. Charges filed. Restitution requests processed. I gave a statement to the authorities. I handed over every file. I let go of the obsession and finally began to exhale. A few months later, I moved out of the motel and into a small studio on the edge of town. Just me, a rescue dog I named Chance, and a half-broken espresso machine I never bothered fixing. And you know what? I started writing again. Something I hadn't done in years. I wrote everything. This whole story, the grief, the rage, the weird limbo of healing. I posted it anonymously at first. But people read it. People reached out. People said, I thought I was the only one. I wasn't. I never had been. And in that, I found peace. I still have days where I flinch at phone calls from unknown numbers. Still have nights where I replay things and wonder if I should have seen it sooner. But most days, I'm okay. Somehow, in the wreckage, I found a version of myself I hadn't met before. Not the man she broke, but the man who got back up. So, if you're reading this and you're in the middle of something you can't explain, something that feels like it's pulling you apart from the inside out, I promise you this. You're not alone. And no matter how deep the betrayal, how carefully the lie was built, the truth always finds a way out. I'm living proof. Ethan.